very first digital agencies in the US, and there was in San Diego. And the customer was a very large utility company that I'm not going to name, but they had a budget and a dream, and they spent $1 million on this website that did everything. And it was so lucky because we got to experiment with some of the first iterations of everything. So
all right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I have the CEO of Balladonna.
You got it.
Dana Todd.
Hello.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Do you want to tell the audience about Balladonna?
So Balladonna is the very first and only marketplace where all the clothes that you buy are made to measure. So we don't store anything. There's no inventory. Everything is made on demand precisely to your body measurements. And we do this by working with designers who specialize in women's made to measure from around the world. That's a direct to consumer model, very similar to like an Etsy or an Amazon, but it's specialized so that when you upload your measurements, you only have to do it once, and then you can shop across any of our merchants. We have people in 10 different countries, 12 designers in 10 countries, and growing.
Yeah. It's a great way to have a bespoke dress.
So why it's important for women to have made to measure. And when I started this out, I thought it was just me, right? And what we found is that 75% of all women have trouble finding clothes to fit. And that's not because they have abnormal bodies. It's because they are a victim of a completely chaotic, non-standardized measurement sizing system. Men have it very easy. You guys experience only a fraction of what women experience with the inconsistencies from brand to brand, and even, from garment to garment within the same brand. So there's really a lot of frustration out there with sizing. And so when I started going through this and investigating, well, gosh, you can actually get pretty much anything you want, even down to underwear made custom. So why aren't we doing it? And I figured out that, frankly, the user experience on most of these situations is terrible. And so I was like, hey, I'm pretty good at digital product development. Maybe I could do this.
Yeah. So we have that in common. We like, we have our heads around digital products. In terms of, two questions. In terms, custom means expensive, right? Like we're in the business of custom software development. It's expensive compared to out-of-the-box software. And then also, how do you get the measurements?
So I'll take your first question, because actually it does not have to be expensive. In fact, we have two different lanes. So if you go on our website, it's balladonna.com, you'll see custom everyday and custom couture. So custom everyday are all below a $300 price point. In fact, most things are at or around or at or less than $100. So we have custom made shirts for $65. So we have very, very affordable custom made. And then of course we have our couture stuff. So yeah, if you want something super fancy, we can hook you up. But part of that has to do with our business model. As a marketplace, we don't do a retail markup. So the price that you see is what the makers set. And then we take a commission on that. So that allows them to have the lion's share of the money, which gives you a better product, right? Because they can use nicer fabric, they can pay their people better. So we're not participating in slave labor or unethical work situations. And yeah, I think it just gives you more control over the whole process. So in terms of measurements, that's actually been one of our sticking points. Women in America just don't know their measurements. We don't even know how to. And a lot of women have, honestly, we thought that most people would fear it because they didn't want to know their measurements. And while there is a certain percentage of that, the larger bulk of it is just like, it's a pain in the butt. How do and two, what if I mess this up? Right? There's a lot of fear around there. If I mess this up, I'm going to be stuck with something, right? So there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt there. The good news is that the technology for digital body measurement is getting better and better. So there are apps out there, and we've got a partnership with 3D Look. And we just built an alpha that will allow us to take in body measurements from any type of app or body measurement system and pull those into our system, because everybody has different standards. It's bonkers. So yeah, that is our biggest hurdle, is how to make that palatable and simple for women to do.
How long ago has this been going on? How far are you into the startup? And how has COVID affected you?
Well, we launched our MVP in 2019. So 2019 was kind of our work out the bugs year. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. We did some initial marketplace growth, and outreach and building our client list and just making our first mistakes and successes. Yay. Fortunately, a lot more successes than mistakes. So we have about I think a 72% perfection rate, meaning like it fits perfectly right out of the box, which is considerably higher than retail. Retail is about a 50%. So, or mass manufactured. So that's good. So we increased all of our baseline metrics. 2020 was doing great until COVID hit. So because well, most people don't think about getting something custom made unless they are going to a wedding or a party or a reunion or some vacation, something where they really want to feel transformed or special. They have
all that's gone.
Yeah, all that's gone. Gone. Bye-bye.
I mean, I wear significantly more casual clothes.
I did too. I got excited. I got to dress up today. So.
Yeah. No, it's that's really tough. And I think it's going to come back. People are getting vaccinated. I'm waiting for my second shot. Somebody watching this video, like, what are you talking about? Second shot, like 5 years from now.
Like, what? Oh yeah. But, well, actually, no, we've seen a market increase in sales and inquiries this year. So it is coming back, and thank God. We're really happy about that. And what's interesting is that the stuff that we're getting the most inquiries around are the 100% bespoke. We don't advertise it on our site, but for certain garments, we will go ahead and take those on as like full bespoke, meaning we'll work from a sketch and create a muslin and send it to you. It's sort of the more old-fashioned standard way of tailoring, but we just don't push that because, it's definitely higher price point and it's a little riskier, and not every design can be made by the people that we have, so.
Oh, and not every, like, if you're not a clothes designer, just like if somebody were to throw a non-designer were to throw a design idea together for a site, and like, well, maybe that's, or an app, like maybe that's not the best idea,
Very true. Yeah, that's always the worst, when they get it and they're like, oh, this didn't work out at all like I thought it was going to be in my dreams.
Right.
So that's why having that little muslin step at least helps, because then we could get the fit perfect.
So you essentially have a double-sided marketplace, which are really hard problems. So how do you get both sides of the market and build both sides of the market?
Well, we focus first on the merchant side, the providers. Our designers, I was really lucky that this whole journey of mine kind of came out of some spiritual work that I was doing. And I'm one of these people who believes there are no accidents. And I also am just like the luckiest person on the planet, because these things just fall in my lap. It's so exciting. Right? So I ended up, after I was buying these custom made clothing myself, long before I ever had the idea of Belladonna, I was in communication with a designer in Romania who was making stuff for me, and I really liked her work. And then weirdly, my college alumni, which I was on the board of, was having a trip to Romania to go meet with sort of the heads of ministry over there and talk to them about they were having some of the same problems we were with the election in terms of interference and fake news and a lot of fake accounts and things like that. So since my background was in search marketing and social media marketing, I went over there as like, a representative of the university. And so I reached out to the woman on Etsy and I said, hey, it's going to sound weird, but I'm going to be in Bucharest in a few weeks. Would you like to have a drink? Because I have an idea I'd like to talk to you about. And it's one of those typical origin stories, right? I literally drew it on a napkin sketch at the bar, and she loved it. She said, I'm in. And so then by the time I left Eastern Europe, I had 4 designers signed up. And then on the way home, I was talking to my seatmate about it. And this woman 2 rows up was listening to us, and she leaned back and gave me her business card. She was like, when you launch that thing, give me a call. I'll be your first customer. So, I knew then that we really were onto something. And while it's not going to be easy, because no one's really ever succeeded at this before, it's going to eventually be the way we buy things is on demand. We can't keep overproducing. The planet is dying.
Yeah. Well, I used to pre-COVID have trips to Thailand, but I remember a time when it is, I would, it's so much cheaper to get a suit tailor-made there, right? And actually they got it down to a science. They can make it so fast. So what I usually do is when I land, the first few days, I do like, okay, I can meet a tailor, get my measurements, and then a weekend or before I leave, I go back, pick it up, they make some adjustments. But yeah, it's you can get overseas get really amazing tailor-made suits, and you kind of brought that, like what otherwise people would have to do to kind of like go to Romania, go to Thailand, and bring it.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, our supply chain right now is so limited to a few sources. That's why if you talk to people, especially women, and again, my market is women. So when you talk to women about some of their pain points, one of the things that they talk about in fashion is when you're shopping now, everything basically looks the same. There's just 50,000 variations of essentially the same thing. And so there's not a lot of true variety in the choices. So by being able to bypass that existing mega supply chain and going directly to individual tailors in Europe, in Israel, in India, you name it, then Canada, you can bypass that supply chain and basically build your own supply chain.
Yeah. And how are you marketing this? Because, we connected through a marketing group, and, I don't know very much about marketing. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk and learn more. And you also have a background working for a digital marketing agency.
Yeah, so I've been doing digital stuff since 1997. When I was working with an agency, I had my own agency. We ended up doing a buyout very early in 97. And so I had my own agency called SiteLab, and with some partners. And that was my first business, kind of starting my own business with partners. And we really were very early into what we now know as digital marketing. Like I actually, true stories, I got two brags for you. Number one, I was the first agency to buy a pay-per-click ad. It was Alta Vista, not Google. So I can verify that. And also I was the person who coined the term organic as it relates to search engine optimization.
Really? Why did you call it organic?
I don't know. It just kind of came out one day at a conference and just everybody adopted it. It seemed right. So yeah. Awesome. It was a small population then. Back then there really weren't very many search marketers, and they were a really weird bunch of people. We had porn people, we had ex-firemen, we had just
ex-firemen.
Yeah, seriously. And he's brilliant. So there's just all these really interesting people who were drawn into it in the early stage. So yeah, so digital marketing has been core to my mind ever since. So building digital experiences, you're not going to succeed unless you do digital marketing. So how did we market Validana? It's largely been word of mouth and organic. So of course I'm going to SEO the heck out of that thing. And most of our traffic does come from our search results. People find us mostly on Google, which I'm really proud of because I don't have to spend really much at all. We did experiment, and we still continue to experiment with social media advertising. It's a super crowded market out there, and it's hard to differentiate yourself in an endless scroll of click buy, click buy, click buy. Because what we're selling is not a product. What we're selling is a service. An experience. Yeah, so it's got to be experiential. And what we found is we played around with putting it in retail, like going into a boutique and having things alongside retail. We've done markets. We've done a lot of different experiments over the last couple of years to see what works best. And the thing that works best is where we can tie it to an experience. So kind of some of the more traditional stuff that you see with clothing is, galas and fundraisers. The artisan markets do work really well for us, kind of old school stuff, frankly. Our digital ads do actually work. Google ads are great. We're doing some YouTube advertising now. So the video marketing appears to be one of the better things that we can do. Again, bringing that experience, bringing some kind of emotion in, not just dress, $99, click, right? So it's a very different kind of experience. So we have to mirror that from the get-go, from that very first introduction. And of course, we invested in PR, and I've done some old school stuff, dude. This year, the deals were happening. So I was able to buy like national magazines for
cheap.
So yeah, like $700 for, In Touch magazine, which basically is, I don't know, 10 million circulation, crazy. crazy.
Wow.
So a lot of as a digital marketer, it's hilarious to me that I'm just like, yeah, I'll just
How do you
some
track all that? Do you
analog.
just have a code or use this discount or?
On those, I don't even bother because it's all going to be disconnected. Nobody's going to use their code.
Yeah.
They just do, right?
Yeah, they just go straight. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I were doing like a larger, like a full page or something, I would. But these are typically like an advertorial spot or something in one of the galleries that you can buy into cheaply. So, but they work though. They really do because you start seeing, and it's anecdotal at best, but it's all. I guess the thing with marketing is it's not one thing, it's all things, but consistently, right? You try, you experiment, you see what works, you see what doesn't work. Obviously, invest more in the things that work. Rinse, repeat. Email marketing works really well for us too. But that's kind of.
What about direct mail now that everybody's stuck at home?
If I had the budget, I would. I actually would. I really would, because again, over the past 5 years, you might have noticed that your mailbox is getting thinner and thinner.
It's a lot thinner. Yeah, it's a lot thinner
because everybody's doing digital. So as a marketer, the thing that you really should always be doing is go where everybody isn't
going. Yeah. I get a lot less junk mail. Yeah.
And one of the next things I'm going to be trying out is Hulu and some podcast advertising. So there are some podcast networks now that are doing insertions, so they'll do dynamic insertion, and you can do some level of targeting within those. So that's pretty cool. So that's a new type of thing. It used to be that you had to pay a significant amount of money for the on-air announcer kind of a thing, much more like the radio model.
Right. But the sponsorship model now you can just insert. Yeah.
Yeah, because it makes more sense it allows more participation by smaller advertisers. So you can just kind of get in and get what you need demographically.
Right. I mean, also it'd be great to just like YouTube or Google, right? Be able to try a small test on this podcast, that podcast, see what works.
Right.
Yeah. If
we can get that. Again, so anything that we do is going to be tied to people being in a relaxed state of mind or an entertainment or an experiential state of mind.
Right. Since you were so early in digital, tell us about some of the early days. We were talking about the first website you worked on was $1 million. $1
million.
Yeah, tell me about that.
And it wasn't even that big. So I was brought in because I was working traditional advertising agency before that, and I was brought into this little fledgling. It was a startup, one of the very first digital agencies in the US. And there was in San Diego. And the customer was a very large utility company that I'm not going to name. But they had a budget and a dream. And they spent $1 million on this website that did everything. And it was so lucky because we got to experiment with some of the first iterations of everything. So this is before Flash. There was another technology that we used before that called Shockwave. So this thing had Shockwave, which was super expensive back then. You had only like 7 people could program it. And we did VRML, which is 3D rotation. So they had virtual walkthroughs where you could go in and see one of their electronic turbines in VRML and rotate it around. You could do a virtual tour of their plant so they could have children walk through without being endangered, right? So they could promote it to the local schools.
I learned VRML. I bought a book and I taught myself VRML.
Oh my God. So this is nuts, right? Yeah. It wasn't very pretty. It was just
it was super low poly. Yeah. I was like, can't be that impressive compared to renderings and stuff from even CD-ROMs back then, right? Mist the game probably looked better than VRML.
That is true. Yeah. And back then there just were so few back to standards, right? So there were very few standards, and you may remember back in the day building websites that you had, I think it was 14 web-safe colors, 14. Imagine if you had to make your whole website in only 14 colors, or risk destabilization where things didn't match up and you had strange background changes. So yeah.
Well, the browsers were moving so fast that standards, different support in Netscape and IE didn't really support the same things. And you kind of had to have these weird kludgy JavaScript, if IE do this, if, whatever.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Well, the early SEO days, you had to do 6 different versions of your website and serve it to a different flavor to every engine out there. So if it's Alta Vista, show them this site. If it's IE, I think was around, but they had low, but it was Alta Vista, any of the search engines, like if traffic was coming off a particular search engine, you would actually show a different version of your website optimized just for that search engine.
That's ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. It was a lot of ridiculous back then, but it was a lot of fun though, because we were always right on the cutting edge. Like we were working with something called Cybercoin, which was micropayments in the 90s, right? Which now it seems they were, why is that so exciting? But there was no online payment, nothing that was universal. And, PayPal was just a gleam in somebody's eye at that point. And Peter Thiel's eye, I guess. And micropayments and cyber, because there were banks, right? So we worked with a bank called, I think it was called Cybercoin or Cybercash, one of those. So yeah, like very early days, we had to build the ecosystem, including financial stuff, right? So yeah, I was nuts being part of that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I remember a lot of Shockwave. I don't hear much of that. Like Flash.
Thank God.
I was a Flash developer, and I actually, a lot of designers they do Flash, but it's all weird code. Whereas like I came from a proper coding background, so when I wrote Flash code, it was like almost like pure code, and and then designers wouldn't know how to do anything with it because it's all in code. But yeah, those were the good old days when it was a good platform in terms of like, well, if you can get it running in Flash, you're guaranteed that you have the same experience in IE and Netscape and all the different crazy browsers.
Well, for the kidlets on who watch this, it was the first interactivity, right? You could go in and you could touch something and something else would happen. So before that, you had to kind of fake it with animation, but it could actually interact with data on the background or a decision-making engine or something and modify the experience based on your physical input.
Much more interactive. And it's basically, and even in many ways, it still hasn't gotten to that level of how amazing Flash can do some things, I would say. But I think people also went a little wild with Flash and just made for crazy experiences.
Well, it's a bandwidth hog too. So,
yeah.
But speaking of standards, though, that's one of the things that that I'm working on now. So being a technology person coming into fashion, it's just like, y'all, why don't you talk to each other? Why don't your systems talk to each other? Why don't you have standards? There's so many questions I have, and I have so much understanding now about why the system is so broken. And everybody's kind of working on 100-year-old assumptions and methodologies in the manufacturing side of things. And so I'm collaborating with a group of other like-minded folks, and we are going to be, hopefully in the next few months, we're putting together the groundwork now, starting an open source collaboration. So having people come in and trying to create, we're not calling it standards because that's going to be really hard for people to change their mind. So instead, what we're doing is coming up with a calibration framework. So very similar to the web, you don't have to lock everybody into the same browser, but you have to be able to understand how to talk to each browser, right? So we don't have to force everybody to use the same sizing system, but we do have to figure out a way to understand what that means to that and that means to that. So that's going to be fun and exciting.
That seems like a sort of a hard right from Belladonna.
It is and it isn't, though. I mean, for the bigger vision, so, okay, MVP is make pretty clothes for women that fit. Yay, right? So we can do that and we can continue doing that. But I have bigger visions to really be able to help enable on-demand manufacturing of all kinds. So part of that is it's a two-sided market, right? So we have to do market education. We have to tell people why they want custom, why they want on-demand, because it has a smaller footprint and it gives you a lot less waste. Do you know that some 40% of returns are based on size? So that's massive. If we fix that, if we can reduce that return rate, then we can change the planet, essentially. We can get towards those emissions goals that Biden just laid out, right? We've got some very aggressive carbon footprint cuts we have to make by 2030, I think it was. So for us to get there and to drive on demand, we need to do market education, but we also need to create a method to scale it. It's not going to replace traditional manufacturing until we can scale it. And the only way to scale it is to create some technological standards in communication.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, even the platform you created, I understand it's bespoke. The software.
Oh, yeah. So when I first went out shopping for software, I was like, all right, Shopify. Everybody's doing Shopify. But I found out very quickly that not that many people make marketplace software. So there are very few rentable or buyable marketplaces out there. And Shopify, I was getting really high quotes for custom dev on their system. And basically at that point, I should have just started from scratch and done it myself. So I did luck out though, and I found a company in Canada called Aveti, and they were launching what they called a hybrid SaaS. So it is a shared code base, but it allows full customization. And they're the only ones that I found besides Miracle that allowed full customization. And Miracle's price point starts at $500,000. Starts at $500,000.
Jeez, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't spend $500,000, trust me on that. So we had to do major customizations around our shopping cart, for example. So when you check out at Balladana, it's going to look at what you have in your cart. It's going to bring up the measurements that you need and populate it with the data that we have on file for you and ask you to input some measurements. If you don't have them, you can do it later, but it's just that quick gut check. Is everything okay? If you need to adjust anything, you can do so, and it'll update the database in real time. And then you check out from there. So having that centralized, secure customer profile is really important to what makes us unique. Additionally, on the back end, just being able to give the level of customization to each one of our shopkeepers, right? Our designers who have their shops on Balladana, we needed to give them an awful lot of support and customization as well.
Yeah. So it's a Etsy model marketplace where people can also, so they have a storefront within your site?
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, actually, like I said, my first designer was on Etsy, and she still is on Etsy. So we compete in a way with Etsy, but for us, I mean, there's no difference in pricing. So for us, the difference is the customer service, right? So when we did that work last year to understand our customer base, the customers, we talked to people who were customers and people who signed up to our list but hadn't bought yet. And what we found is that the thing that they valued the most across the board was feeling like we had their back, right? We trust you, that if something goes wrong, you're going to be there. It's not going to be some stranger in Romania, right? So that there's going to be someone to help me with this process, someone to help me configure a suit. I've never configured a suit before. I don't know whether I want a wide lapel or not, right? So having that same, again, back to that experiential thing, having that experience and support is critical for this to work. Customer service is not easily scalable, but frankly, we're going to worry about that a little bit more later.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You're much more focused, so you can provide a customer service that an Etsy can't provide and scale because they sell so many things, right? Yeah. Like, how are they going to be able to answer questions about dresses? Like, they don't want to even get in the middle of it, and they're like,
exactly.
Then you're dealing with hundreds of different people who customize clothes, and they don't have there's no standard process.
Right.
Yeah.
So custom made clothes and just the whole custom concept is actually not a new trend, and I didn't start it. And last year, one of the interesting things that came out of the pandemic was that Deloitte, who had been predicting, they've been watching the rise of customization, mass customization, and personalization in fashion for a long time. And they accelerated their predictions to where now they're seeing that custom is going to make up 30% of the garment industry by 2030. So this is happening pretty fast. And just since I started researching it, I've watched the technology grow. I've seen more players come into the space, making offerings. I'm starting to see a lot more movement there. So it is coming together. And we did our own research. That was another thing we did last year. We was like, all right, we got time. Let's do some market research. Yeah. So we commissioned our own study to understand how people thought about custom, both men and women, by the way. So the blended numbers on that is that we had more than 40% of the people that we interviewed said they either had experience or were interested in custom clothes. So that very much supports the Deloitte numbers as well.
Yeah. Is there a subscription model idea? Kind of like Audible credits or something?
You know, a lot of people ask me that, and I wish I could come up with one, but the problem is custom, right?
Yeah, it's custom.
It's custom.
How often?
So
Like,
I'm not going to whip together a whole bunch of designs and ship them to you and hope hope you like them. That's,
well, no, I mean, like
yeah.
enough credit, so that you're like, hey, you have credit for a new, dress every quarter or pants or, whatever. It's a credit system. I don't know.
Yeah, if we did something like that, I would like to actually make it a partnership so that it could kind of come along with something else. Particularly since we know that a lot of our customer base are social do-gooders, right? They care about the planet. They are typically a bit more mature in their shopping decisions, right? They think more about it. It's a more thoughtful purchase. So they may be more interested in something that would be, tied to a luxury club or something like that.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, actually, probably the more sane idea would be just special occasions and email marketing or content marketing around, hey, your spouse's birthday is coming up, or special occasions are coming up, or
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, once we get people hooked and they realize that they don't ever have to buy off the rack again, then they're in, right?
Right.
And we've already had return customers, which is so satisfying. So that's great. That's exactly what we want. We want people to be addicted. We call it the cult of custom.
Yeah.
Like you, awesome. Every time you go to Thailand, you get a new suit, right?
Yeah. Well, not anymore because I'm not going anywhere. Well, once you get to a certain age, people stop. There was a time when, you're always at weddings, right? You're always going to, and then, and then that drops off eventually. So that hasn't happened in a few years. Yeah.
Well, we have a whole bunch of casual stuff. And I think men, y'all have kind of a limited set of clothes. Shapes,
we're not,
right?
Yeah, we're not really.
Basically, you got like creative. 12 shapes and you're done.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the women's market is so difficult to solve for, at scale. But women have a lot more casual needs, but there are a lot more casual options that are custom made. So again, back to that whole, like, I can make you a custom t-shirt out of double thickness bamboo that you're never going to get off the rack. And it's going to be less than $100.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Or I can get you a custom made Steve Jobs turtleneck made of bamboo that's like butter, less than $100. Like all these things, right? So I'll get you one.
Hey.
I'm sure I could ask Delia if she could make a men's turtleneck for you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show. Like, this was really fun. And I learned a lot, and I got to feel like I got to take a trip down, internet 1.0 memory lane.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show, Dana.
Well, thank you for
do you have any?
Me.
Yeah. We usually ask, is there a coupon code or anything we can do for the people on the show?
Absolutely. We'll make it up right now, and I'll make it happen the minute we hang up. We'll call it PEX 15. How's that?
There you go.
15, and that'll get you 15% off.
There you go.
First order. How's that?
Yeah, try it out.
That's better than our new customer code too. So that's a special just for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks. You too.